Hello, and welcome to the Expression of Interest information session for the demonstration focus area of the Energy Innovation Program's Smart Grid Call for Proposals. The French version of this information session will be held tomorrow, and the information sessions for the other focus area, Regulatory Innovation Capacity Building, will be held later this week. This session is presented by Natural Resources Canada's Office of Energy Research and Development, also known as OERD. Before we get started, I would like to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions via the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel, but please note that project-specific questions will not be answered during this presentation. Also note that questions will be visible to everybody participating in the call. However, you may submit them anonymously via Zoom. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties throughout the presentation, please email the program mailbox on screen. We will be monitoring it throughout the session. On the agenda today is a brief overview of the program and the call, an overview of the eligibility, scope, and funding for the demonstration focus area, an overview of the application process and timelines, including post-expression of interest or EOI stages, an overview of the expression of interest form, and a live Q&A session. Program overview. OERD leads the Government of Canada's efforts in delivering energy research, development, and demonstration funding and accelerating efforts in energy innovation and clean tech programming. The Energy Innovation Program delivers OERD's funding through targeted calls for proposals, as well as other unique funding initiatives across a broad range of energy technology sectors. The Smart Grid Call for Proposals will provide support to the key technology, market, and regulatory innovations that address barriers in order to scale pilot projects into grid-wide deployments. As we can see here, there are two focus areas for this call. Focus Area 1 is for demonstration projects. Focus Area 2 is for regulatory innovation capacity building projects. This information session is for the demonstration focus area, which is currently open for intake until January 10th, 2024. The information session for the regulatory innovation capacity building focus area will happen on Wednesday and Thursday, December 6th and 7th in English and French, respectively. We will be going over some pertinent information regarding the demonstration focus area of this call in this session. However, if you haven't already, we highly encourage you to review the applicant guide for more detailed information. On screen here are the funding parameters for this focus area, as well as some important dates. Please note NRCan's minimum contribution is $500,000 and NRCan's maximum contribution is $6 million for demonstration projects. The maximum contribution from OERD towards total project costs is 50%. However, we do allow for up to 100% of funding stacking between OERD and other government funding programs. Another key piece of information are the project life timelines, as projects can occur over a maximum of 4 years. Projects must start on or after September 1st, 2024 and must end by March 31st, 2028. Please note that when you are adding each of these values into our application forms, if the values are outside of the discussed parameters, you will receive an error message and will not be able to continue with your application until the values are corrected. Eligibility, scope, and funding. Here we can see the list of eligible and encouraged recipients for the demonstration focus area. As you can see, eligibility for the call is quite broad, and most legal entities validly incorporated or registered in Canada, including Indigenous for-profit and not-for-profit organizations and governments, are eligible, as well as all levels of government other than federal. The demonstration focus area has further specified encouraged recipients that align with the parameters of the focus area. These are electricity utilities, electricity system operators, electricity system regulatory agencies and commissions, companies providing aggregation services, industry and research associations, and codes and standards organizations. Please note that there is no preferential treatment for encouraged recipients. Eligibility for the demonstration focus area is further refined by Technology Readiness Level, or TRL. For the demonstration focus area, the starting TRL of the project must be between TRLs 5 and 8. There may be select activities of the project that fall outside of this range. However, they will only be permissible if they are minor but essential to the overall success of the project. For more information on the definition of the different TRLs, please refer to Section 12 in the Applicant Guide. Although there is some judgment required when assessing TRL, please also ensure that your project's starting TRL falls within the typical ranges guided by the definitions in the Applicant Guide. Here we can see examples of activities that are eligible in projects under the demonstration focus area of the call. Eligible activities include innovation in smart grid technologies or solutions and/or market or contract mechanisms. In this instance, innovations may be specific to your jurisdiction. Another example is alterations to existing processes, equipment, or systems to integrate innovative technologies or methods. Engineering, design, and permitting of previously mentioned installations. Finally, we have operational testing, performance analysis, and evaluation of pre-commercial equipment in its intended environment to gauge the efficacy of an innovation. If you are unsure if an activity is eligible or not, please feel free to email the Smart Grid mailbox, which is shared at the beginning and end of this presentation and is also on our webpage and in our applicant guide. This slide outlines what activities are deemed to be ineligible for this focus area. Ineligible activities include the purchase cost for commercially available standalone assets for electricity generation, storage, or loads. For example, solar PV systems, wind turbines, batteries, inverters, heat pumps, thermostats, electric vehicles, and electric vehicle chargers. These are ineligible for reimbursement under this call for proposals. Please note that the demonstration focus area will reimburse the costs and/or incremental costs associated with the innovative integration of these assets, but will not fund the assets themselves. For more information on ineligible activities and expenditures, please refer to the applicant guide. Application process and timelines. On screen is a diagram that outlines the entire application process. It begins with the expression of interest due at 11:59 a.m. Eastern Time on January 10, 2024. Expression of interest forms will be evaluated in the spring 2024. This is a competitive process, and only a select number of expression of interest applicants will be invited to submit full project proposals. Invitations to submit full project proposals will happen in late spring 2024. The full project proposal will ask for much more detailed information about the project and will be reviewed and evaluated again by the Technical Review Committee. The full project proposal phase is also competitive, and only a select number of projects will be notified of a project funding, which is expected to happen in the summer of 2024. Project funding is conditional upon successfully completing the due diligence process. Due diligence will take place in the fall or winter of 2024. This marks the selection of your project, but not a commitment of funding on NRCan's behalf. That having been said, between the beginning of due diligence and the signing of the contribution agreement, you will be within the retroactivity period and can begin to incur eligible costs for reimbursement. We will discuss this in more detail shortly. Following this process, contribution agreements are signed by both parties, which is expected to take place in the winter of 2024-2025. For now, the most important thing on screen is the expression of interest due date, which is 11:59 a.m. Eastern Time, January 10th, 2024. Here we will go into more detail on the two selection periods in this call for proposals, the expression of interest phase and the full project proposal phase. We will go into more detail about the requirements of the expression of interest later in the presentation. The full project proposal, which we are currently expecting to be due in late spring of 2024, will require proponents to provide much more detailed information. This includes a much more comprehensive budget, a detailed statement of work, more rigorous technical information, and greater details regarding alignment with the call. This information will again be reviewed by a technical review committee, and the results are expected to be shared in summer 2024. While these post-selection phases will come much further down the line, it is important to be aware of what will be expected of you if your project is selected for funding. After you are notified of your selection, the due diligence period will begin, and there are two major elements of this process. The first is ensuring that your project meets Government of Canada regulations, including determining if an impact assessment is required and if Indigenous consultation is needed. The second element is a deep dive into the financial elements of the project in order to establish evidence that you can finance your project with non-OERD funding, and if your additional funding is secured. Finally, any additional technical risks that may be flagged by the Technical Review Committee may be investigated at this time. After due diligence has completed, contribution agreement negotiations will commence. These agreements are drafted based on the information provided by the proponent, mostly based upon the finalized budget and statement of work. After the contribution agreement is signed and the project begins, the reporting requirements become active and mandatory. Ongoing project reports are specified in the contribution agreement. The reports are typically required both quarterly and annually, depending on the report, and cover a variety of reporting requirements. The completion report is submitted at the end of the project's life, and the submission of which usually entails the release of a financial holdback. We will go into more detail about the financial holdback in a moment. Finally, the post-completion reports must be submitted annually for 5 years following the completion of the project, starting on the first anniversary following the completion of the project. There are a number of important financial considerations to keep in mind about your financial claims. In order to be reimbursed for costs by NRCan, the expenditures must be incurred and paid for by the proponent. The aforementioned holdback that is reserved for the successful submission of the post-completion report is typically 10%, but this percentage can vary. Finally, we will provide more detail about the eligible expenditure period. Even though the eligible expenditure period is still a ways away, as it does not occur until after the completion of the full project proposal phase when the applicants have been invited to due diligence. However, as we typically get a lot of questions about this period, we are highlighting it here. The invitation to due diligence marks the beginning of the retroactivity period. During this period, proponents may claim up to 30% of NRCan's contribution in a retroactivity claim. However, applicants can only be reimbursed for expenses starting the same fiscal year that the contribution agreement is signed. As a point of clarification, NRCan's fiscal year ends March 31st. So, depending on when a proponent is notified that they have entered the due diligence phase, they need to be mindful of whether it is realistic that a contribution agreement will be signed in the same fiscal year. Expression of interest form. The link to the applicant portal is noted on screen and can also be accessed through the applicant guide. To start an application, you'll be required to register or sign in using a GC key or sign in through your bank account. On screen, you can see the list of pages and sections of the expression of interest that you will have access to once you open a new application on the applicant portal. We will take a closer look at the evaluated sections on the next slide, but please note that all sections are important, even the ones that are not evaluated, as they may still be used to assess the eligibility of your project. The IDEA and declarations pages will both be discussed later in this information session. Here we can see a detailed breakdown on all sections upon which you will be evaluated. Please note that although there is no scoring associated with the mandatory questions, they are essential for establishing your eligibility under the call parameters. The following 5 objectives are awarded 7.5 points each: grid modernization, customer accessibility, how your project informs future deployment, how your project fills a market gap, regulatory impact, and technology and innovation. IDEA project benefits are worth 5 points, project plan is worth 15 points, sources of funding is worth 15 points, GHG emissions reductions are worth 5 points, and key team members and partner organizations are worth 15 points. The entire expression of interest is scored out of a total of 100 points. On this slide, we will discuss Indigenous ownership and engagement. In the EOI form on the applicant portal, there is a section to indicate Indigenous ownership and engagement of your project on the applicant details page. We would like to emphasize here that Indigenous ownership or engagement is not a requirement of this program. However, although there is no quantified score associated with this question, it may be considered as a part of a project's evaluation by the Technical Review Committee. In order for Indigenous ownership and engagement to be considered a merit in this process, it must be meaningful and genuine and reflect the needs of Indigenous peoples and communities. The following definitions will be applied when evaluating Indigenous ownership and engagement. Ownership representation means the organization and/or project ownership structure includes representation of Indigenous people. Partnerships means the project is delivered in partnership with Indigenous organizations or communities, with Indigenous partners directly benefiting from the project financially or otherwise. Team representation means the team includes representation of Indigenous people. And finally, engagement means Indigenous governments, nations, and/or communities have been engaged in the project. Engagement can include, but is not limited to, regular communication, consultation and participation in project-related activities, including planning, review, employment, etc. This call has no government stacking limits on funding, meaning applicants can leverage other government funding to a maximum of 100% of total project cost. Please keep in mind, firstly, other funding sources may have different restrictions on stacking, and secondly, it is important to be careful about overlapping activities and funding, as it is not permitted to receive funding twice for the same activity. An important update: a correction was made to page 5 of the applicant guide regarding the maximum government stacking percentage. The initial language referred to the maximum government stacking percentage as the percentage of total eligible expenditures. This language has been updated to use the term total project costs. This slide discusses the Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways Program, also known as SREPS, another NRCan-based funding program that supports smart grid projects. Although SREPS is not currently accepting applications, NRCan is currently reviewing the program to identify how the recapitalization outlined in Budget 2023 could impact how the program is implemented. Stacking limitations with the SREPS program is unknown, since SREPS program scope details are unknown at this point in time. Please keep in mind that the scope of this program includes technology readiness levels between 5 and 8, and the scope of the previous SREPS program in 2022 included technology readiness levels of 8 and above. On this slide, we will go over the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, or IDEA plan. This page in the EOI application will have questions about IDEA plans and asks if your organization has made any public commitments to IDEA. The information in this section will be used to track progress on workforce diversity and may inform future program and policy development. Please note that this section is separate from the IDEA project benefits question mentioned earlier, which is mandatory and will be evaluated and scored by the Technical Review Committee. Applicants are asked to confirm details of their operations and business details on the declarations page of the application form, including through the declaration on this slide, which reads, "My organization does not conduct business dealings in any country against which Canada has imposed economic sanctions under the United Nations Act, Special Economic Measures Act, or the Justice for Victims of Foreign Corrupt Officials, known as the Sergei Magnitsky Law." Please note that business dealings in a country on this list, which includes China, does not automatically disqualify you from funding. Sanctions are often applied to specific organizations rather than the country itself. If this declaration is left unchecked, you will be contacted by a representative from OERD for additional information that may impact the eligibility of your application. Finally, there are a few important reminders to keep top of mind while you are applying. First, pay close attention to character limits, especially when copying and pasting from another document, as the text boxes in the form will automatically cut off any additional text beyond the character maximum. Second, a reminder that partner organizations and key team member sections are scored with a total value of 15 points. Third, for partner organizations, letters of support that demonstrate your partner's financial commitment to the project are not mandatory, but will be considered during project review. However, letters of support are required if you indicate that partnership is confirmed. Finally, when you're ready to submit your application, click Review and Submit, review errors if any exist, and click Submit. Do not forget to click Submit. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We hope that you have been noting down any questions you may have, and feel free to email project-specific questions to the program mailbox and ask all others in the live Q&A.